Well, welcome to Mostly Peaceful. I had a cool intro going, but I screwed that up. That's okay. Um, Anyways, we have quite a show today, like we did on Halloween. Our pre record was great. There's nothing like having good, spirited, heated debate with a friend and someone who has an intellect and isn't flooded by emotions, and you actually get somewhere. And that's the point of this show. One of the points of this show is to always kind of bounce topics around. We're getting more refined in our production. We'll work on that. Always looking for a producer. Can't pay you, but we can pay you in postage stamps. And for now, but remember, when you're on these topics, when we're on these topics, again, we're not the experts. We're putting out what we know with pretty good sources. We'll always source our information on the show or after the show. But we want you to be doing this at home. We want you to be doing this with your neighbors and your friends. And that's taking these topics that the legacy media is ignoring and talking about them and breaking them down and trying to prove each other wrong. Because you know what happens? You'll find out you're both either wrong or you're both right. But in the process of doing that, in the process of researching and debating and discussing, you certainly learn a lot, and you never forget these topics. And then you start seeing through all the lies, through all the noise, you start seeing the signal. And that's a key thing. So without too much more of me, let me bring my regular co-host, and I am his co-host. We are equitable hosts, if you will. JJ Carrell. He's got a lot to talk about today. And JJ, welcome back. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, I'm excited about tonight's show. We have a great guest, and there's a lot to talk about. As it seems as if the news cycles in the last several months have just spun out of control. Just it's one after another, and the stories are they're almost, you can't get your mind or head wrapped around it. They're happening so fast.
Yeah, no, that's really, and that's a good point too. Part of the problem is all, and I call that, and the signal, not noise. That's not mine. I attribute that to Steve Bannon, but on Steve Bannon's War Room. But he makes a good point. The key is always knowing what's noise and knowing what's signal. And here's a really good way to figure that out. If it's on the cover of the New York Times or CNN's headline or on Morning Joe on MSNBC or even on Fox, now that Tucker Carlson is gone, that is the noise. The signal you'll usually find buried in those articles, buried on page 8 of the New York Times, because they will report it. They'll just be very brief about it. And sometimes you might even have to go to another country's media. I tend to like India for good media, but you just have to have multiple sources and go to source whenever you can. So lots of noise, like JJ said. And JJ, really quickly, want to talk about tonight's guest. Really excited to have Ora Nadrich. Ora is a contributor to Daily Cloud. She is a mindfulness teacher, special mindfulness teacher. She's also an activist, a freedom activist, and she is an author of several books. I have one behind me here that I'll hold up to the screen. Amazing. I mean, I practice mindfulness. There was never, probably when I was growing up, I would think that was some hokey pokey, hippy dippy stuff, but it's really, she'll explain it in real good layman's terms, and also how she applies it. And Ora was kind enough to host my wife and I, Dr. Naomi Wolf, last year at an event, and I believe the event for RFK Jr. and Ed Dowd at their wonderful house in California. The best hosts ever, and her husband, and Naomi, we all became fast friends. We actually just took a nice trip with them in California. So I'm really excited to have her on here. They just visited us, and Ora gets right to the heart of the matter, and she does not hold back. So I think she'll be in good company. JJ, I know you have some questions for her, so that'll be really interesting to see what you
Yeah,
came.
I'm really looking forward to it, just to hear what she has to say from a different perspective, for sure.
Yeah, so she'll be on in about 20 minutes. But before we get to that, JJ, I'm going to go ahead and hand you the mic and tell us what you know. Tell us what you found out. As I said on Twitter, tell us what's today's horribleness.
Well, I think the thing we need to discuss is the Homeland Security Senate hearing that happened yesterday, and it had some fireworks to it. Mayorkas, Secretary of DHS, got up there and he just lied and just blocked whatever they wanted to ask. I mean, they asked some simple questions like, how many people have you arrested and released? I don't know. I don't have those numbers. You're the Secretary of DHS. Hell, you can go on cbp.gov and get, data that's about a day old. So he has access to everything. He went on there and he was talking about how bad the getaways are, and had 600,000 last year. That's what he said. And me and all of my former colleagues and sources, we all got on joint text and we were just raging because we know that's a lie. We know that number could be as high as 10 times that in 1 year, 6 million in 1 year. I tend to think that it's going to be closer to a 1-to-1, meaning whatever you arrested, Border Patrol and CBP arrested, equal to that, or maybe 2-to-1 got away. So that's why I think it could be anywhere from 3 to 6 million last year alone. Now talking about the other 2 years, it was. It's always eye-opening to see him, Mayorkas, speak, because he simply does not care. He doesn't care what they call him. I've seen, this is about the third or fourth one that he's been in that I've witnessed. They've called him Benedict Arnold, the traitor. The new House Speaker, Mr. Johnson, told him it's obvious that everything you're doing is intentional to destroy the American immigration system. Those are strong words, very strong words. Ted Cruz said something to the effect that your lack of ability to do your job is egregious. I don't know if he used the word repulsive, but it was something of that adjective. And it is. And Director Wray from the FBI was there, and it's interesting. Ollie, I'm going to pull this up right now because it's that good. Ollie Bradley, she's an investigative journalist, and she just posted on Twitter, and this is important because this goes to just what Director Wray was saying. And Director Wray, who I don't like, trust, or respect. I think he's running a rogue organization that is partisan, and there's nothing more frightening, frustrating, and scary than law enforcement that's partisan. And he's the epitome of that. But he said that he's petrified of what's crossing the border and the security gaps that we have. And Ollie Bradley just posted on Twitter, and because this goes right to the heart of it. There was a 38-year-old man from Venezuela that was arrested in Eagle Pass, Texas. He just exactly what you and I have discussed. What happens? He was given an NTA, a notice to appear. He was paroled for 60 days. He never showed up for his court hearing, and he was then determined, because we do not, when we quote vet people as they come across, meaning we put them through our database, it does not work because it's only in America. So his data check came back clean, as all of them do, but turned out that he is a murderer from Venezuela. And then he does not show up for his court date, so he's now illegal. They found him. Unbelievable. I mean, I really can't make this up, but this is where they found him. They found him living at the Joint Base Cape Cod in Massachusetts, on a military base in Massachusetts, and they arrested him. And Director Wray said Quote, the gaps in our intelligence are real. That's frightening. When you start listening, Brian, you start listening to everyone start getting in line about the intelligent gaps, the security breaches. I mean, it's now left wing media is saying it. People are just saying it straight out loud. And that should, you talked about the dog whistle or the signal or the noise. Listen to what these people are saying. They're in the know and they're preparing you for the worst.
Wow. And if he's on that, it's joint base Cape Cod, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if he's on that base, there's a good chance he was eating those corn pops and little boxes of cereal that those very generous Cape Codians were giving those immigrants. He may have been sitting on one of their porches or in one of their houses.
Yeah. He was a
Because
murderer.
that's where they moved him. Moved them.
Yeah. It's crazy. We live in almost, I think it's insulting to Orwell to say we live in Orwellian times. I think it's beyond that. It's more Twilight Zone.
It's like Twilight Zone meets American Horror Story meets Black Mirror. It's like they all got together and had a baby, and that baby did not come out right.
No.
What else do you have, JJ? I'm going to just have to step off the stage for a second.
Okay.
But to welcome our guest. But in the meantime, you had also mentioned something last conversation we had about General Flynn. Do you want to get into that?
Yeah, I would love to get into that.
You give an overview if you want.
Yeah. I apologize in advance. I forgot the lady's name that was the podcast host, and I believe it was like 2 days ago. That General Flynn, who I have deep respect for because of the service in the military and then the abuse that he endured, he and his family, with the illegal witch hunt into his life and ruined him financially. And he's now back on his feet and doing well. But the fact that a retired general, got just sideswiped and destroyed for nothing and found that it was all a lie, the Russia collusion and all that other nonsense. But he said something very shocking, but he said it very flippantly in this interview. And the host asked him about people being compromised in our federal government. And now this was the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. So this guy knows what he knows, right? He's at the highest level. And he said flippantly that there are congressmen and senators that are compromised from having sexual relations with minors in their foreign nation junkets that they take. And then he just went on. Like, it was like me talking to Brian about, okay, there's a group of illegal aliens that crossed in Eagle Pass, and they went to X, Y, and Z. And then, I mean, it was like an everyday thing. Like it was normalized in his voice. And the statement that he made was damning, but it was the way he said it caught my eye or my ear. And I was like, whoa, okay, time out. And Brian and I had a very heated discussion on this last, and he was telling me to hold my horses, pull the reins back. And I agree with him because I want to find out better context. It really bent. It made me. I was bent when I got off the show. I was like, this is BS. This is wrong. If he knows that senators and congressmen are raping, there's no consensual sex with little kids up to teenagers. That's called rape. That constitute the term rape. So congressmen and senators are raping young kids, boys and girls, on their foreign junkets to China and elsewhere. I want names because those people need to be put in jail. That's treason. Under the color of law, the color of the flag, you're representing my nation and you're raping kids. That needs to be stopped too, because every moment that you're silent, maybe another kid's being raped as we're speaking. That's inexcusable. So I held back my horse because I started digging deeper and deeper. And then I went to bed and got up, started going through all my news cycle, drinking my monster, my green monster that I love in the morning. And boom, I see Man in America by Seth Holhouse. This is an incredible podcast. If you want to go, really great podcast. I love it. And he starts in with, he's interviewing General Flynn. And I'm like, holy cow, I'm watching this. And he asked General Flynn, I watched your podcast with, and I forget her name and I apologize, and I will get it before the podcast is over. And you stated, boom, boom, boom. Can you elaborate? And he talked for 15 minutes and he never spoke about it. He just danced around it. Why? I'm intellectually curious, and I'm bent that, hey man, you made a frightening statement from a man that is on the top of the intelligence world. You know what he has: pictures, videos, debriefs, white papers, everything. I want to see those. As an American, I want to know. And I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat. I want to line them up and I want them tried immediately. This is insanity. So Brian, this is a story that I don't think is going to go away. I think it's interesting, get bigger and bigger.
And I was, so the other day we were discussing this, and JJ's, as usual, came in pretty hot, and I'm like, well, let's, get all the facts.
Give me a little. Sometimes
you do. That's a compliment. That's a compliment.
Oh, it's a compliment. When you okay.
Yeah, man, like missiles and firepower. Okay. Man.
All right.
Simmer down there, white squall. But the thing is, I like to play devil's advocate. I'm like, well, let's look at other sources. Let's call him, and definitely going to do our best to get him and JJ on an interview. I think it'd be great, because we do want to know. And JJ picked up on, which I'm impressed by your instincts, that he was just so matter of fact, so flippant about it, and that's pretty upsetting to hear. And it's just crazy that just like, was it today? I think he was on this very same podcast you'd been on. Yes. Seth Holhouse is a Man in America, which is great. Love Seth. And he asked him the same question, and there wasn't a great answer, as I understand. I haven't seen it yet, but that's pretty much it, right? I mean, he didn't have an answer when he was asked, hey, did you know about this, or whatever Seth asked.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Seth asked him, and he didn't. He just didn't answer it. I was waiting, like, dude, this is a big deal. And if you don't know and you misspoke or you didn't clarify it the right way, that's fine too. Clarify it. That, you know what, this is stuff that I believe is happening. I don't have any evidence, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know.
And we'll find out. But no, you're right. It's definitely something to follow up on. I mean, there are no coincidences, I say. So, I don't say that either. Stole another one from Steve Bannon. But yeah, I mean, that's, and this is, and we're not the type of guys to be I told you so types, but what is it now? Like several things, houses getting broken into that might have like signs that label them as woke. Yeah. We talked about, JJ talked about that. A week later, there was a international gang of illegal immigrants breaking into houses, I think in Michigan. Yep, and they were targeting the houses based on some kind of sympathetic,
defund the police, defund police,
and no humans are illegal.
Correct, no humans are illegal. That was a big one, yeah.
And so the gang chose those houses to break into. There were several others too. We have to list them, and it's not to put a feather in our cap. I don't want any feathers in that cap at all. I want no feathers in the I told you so cap in what we talk about. But I think it's important to know, because we do try to tell you as much as we can how we arrive at those, what our sources are. And this is really getting real, because we're getting to the point where this is in your neighborhoods. This is everywhere, and it will affect you. So you have to be in front of the news, because there could be horrible things happening next door and one street over, and you can guarantee the legacy media, including the local news, will not report it. You'll have no idea if that's your only source or you don't know how to find information. So that's why we want to always remind you that, hey, we told you this, this is how we found it. Make sure you keep these things on alerts and make sure you're looking for them. All right, so JJ, let me talk really quick. Gotta figure out these controls. There we go.
You're doing great.
Great, thanks, JJ. I appreciate that. He's honestly, this guy motivates me. You're bringing back my work ethic, by the way, because he shamed me about my beauty sleep, so I set my alarm for earlier than 10 the other day. So,
oh my gosh, what are you, a teenager?
Oh, I don't sleep that late. I can't sleep that late. I have a puppy. Anyways, so we talk. A lot of these topics are really, really upsetting. They're all upsetting. We get very emotional, but try to stay sound about them. But at the same time, there's a frustration I'm sure everyone feels with so much news, so much confusion, so much, twisting and turning of narratives. For instance, the Israeli massacre and the subsequent protests that followed here in the United States, most of them organized on actionnetwork.org and by Jewish Voice for Peace. We've talked about that. We're not going to get into that too much tonight. But you see, it's I guess the frustration even for me is, okay, wait a minute. They're supporting Palestine. Some are even supporting Hamas. But wait, they were also against people killing people. And wait a minute, I thought these people supported Israel last year. And why is climate change groups asking for a ceasefire? In the Gaza Strip, you see these things. It's almost like you feel like, how the hell do I even keep up with it? I have my methods. I don't really know how to articulate them, but that's part of what brings me into tonight's guest. Just a very small part of it. And this is my cry for help to her. But we are really privileged tonight to have Ora Nadrich. And she is a friend of mine. She's wonderful. Her and her husband are very close. We're happy to have them out here in New York recently. And Ora has been doing she's a very well established author. She's a mindfulness teacher. She's a mindfulness activist. And I will definitely have to have Ora explain to me how one goes about doing that. But if it's Ora doing it, you know that she's one of the best, as she is at everything she does. And I won't muck it up too much with talking too much. Her most recent book is called Time to Awaken. And hopefully Ora will be able to talk about that tonight as well. So I'm going to bring Ora onto the stage, and super happy to have her, honored to have her. And without much further ado and less talk from me, this is Ora. Ora, how are you doing?
Hey, hi, Brian and JJ. So good to be with you today.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for joining us. Where are you? Are you in California?
Hey, if I'm not in upstate with you and Naomi, this is where I am, in Southern California.
Great. So, Ora, why don't you, I'm just going to go ahead and give you center stage here. Can you explain a little bit about your work, your life's journey, some of the work you do for Daily Clout? And I loved your latest book. I read it twice. Maybe you could explain a little bit about that and what you're working on now.
Thank you. So I'm a mindfulness practitioner, and, people might say, well, what is that? What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is the practice of being in the present moment with total awareness, which I think really is quite important in these times of which we are in. Being aware, being present, being very aware of what's going around in our surroundings and out in the world. So my book, Time to Awaken, was a departure for me because I've written books on the mindfulness subject. My book, Live True, was voted one of the top mindfulness books of all time by Book Authority. I wanted to plug mindfulness into what took place in the last 3 years, which was unprecedented. And it was when the world completely went upside down, I mean, I think we can call it a lot of things, but the new normal is, I think, what you both talked about. If, what did you say? If Orwell had a baby with Black Mirror and it was some kind of dystopian baby, hybrid baby that was born of this time, plugging mindfulness into insanity is a great challenge for me because I've never had to do that before. It's very wonderful to talk about equanimity and to talk about present moment awareness, but you take that present moment awareness and you plug it into a dystopian time. That's both fascinating and terrorizing at the same time. It's quite daunting and actually should inspire us to want to win this battle.
Gotcha. Well, I know very little about mindfulness, except for the fact that you've told me I'm a pretty mindful guy, which I appreciate. But to the person who's never heard of it, if you were talking to my dad, God rest his soul, he would say, "What kind of hippy dippy stuff are you talking about?" And I would probably tell him, "Well, you could, based on your answer, you could probably use a little mindfulness of your own."
Yeah,
Go ahead.
mindfulness 101, Brian, without dumbing it down, really, it's an inherent quality that each and every one of us has, meaning that we all have the ability to be mindful, to be conscious, to be aware, to be present, to be kind, to be thoughtful. It's all of those things. The closest thing we have to a practice of it that I think people can relate to is meditation. Meditation is the formal practice of mindfulness. That means we make a date with ourselves to sit quietly somewhere, try and quiet the mind and connect to something that makes sense to our peace of mind, where we can shut out the world, crazy world, and just give ourselves a little respite from the madness. Well, that's great when you're doing that for 20 minutes or 45 minutes on a yoga mat or a meditation pillow. But what about all the other moments of the day? It's easy to sit on a yoga mat or a meditation pillow and chant and sit in the lotus position. And then you get on the freeway and someone cuts you off in traffic and you flip them the bird. So how mindful is that? It's really being able to stay in that state of present moment awareness with equanimity, with non-reactivity. Now, think about the times that we're in right now. It's almost near to impossible to be non-reactive. Before I came onto your show, I just saw something pop up on my Instagram feed that the president of Turkey announced to 100,000 people that World War III is near. It boggles my mind that I'm having a conversation with you and I can talk about mindfulness and the possibility of World War III. I couldn't imagine ever having this type of conversation in my wildest dreams.
Yeah. I mean, the good news is we all know each other, and we wouldn't know each other if it weren't for the crazy times we're in.
Exactly right.
You said something I think is really, really important, and it's something that I've tried. I learned. You said not reacting or resisting the urge to react, and I remember one time. I started doing this because I laughed at my own rage one time. I was just got off a airborne operation in Fort Lewis, so your adrenaline's pumping and everything. And I want to get home. My daughter was toddler. The babysitter was giving me a hard time about being late, and so I was really stressed. And all of a sudden, this guy cuts me off, and I lose it. Now my hair's all messed up, crazy from the helmet. I got all the battle rattle on, and I chase him down, and I'm probably going to jump out and inflict bodily harm or something, because when you're in that state, it's hard to shut it off. And then he defused the whole situation. He's a normal kind of maybe 30 something guy, and I pull up and I'm raging, and he just goes, and that little gesture right there, I was like, yeah, he's right. Like, sorry, like it happens.
Yes.
And I always remember that moment. I've done that a few times myself when people, currently I'm right outside Boston. This is like road rage central.
Right.
but I'll try to give someone a thumbs up or something. And even if they're horrible, because really, what's the point? Where's it going to get you? They could be going through something. But anyways, are there other? Would you consider that like a tool, if you will, or is there a name for something like that?
Funnily enough, I mentioned road rage I think it's in my first book, Says Who, which is a cognitive method that I created for transforming negative and fear-based thoughts. Well, one of them was also being in a state of reactivity, and mindfulness is really, again, present moment awareness with acceptance and non-reactivity. I mean, that's quite a meditation in itself. And you're a mental warrior. You understand the mechanics of war and what it means to really stay in present moment awareness and not go into reactivity. I'm looking at what's unfolding right now before our eyes, that there is this global chaos that's going on. And we very well could be on the verge of World War III, So you take road rage and then you juxtapose it to that we are in this volatile state of eruption. How does one, just individually take that moment to pause and not do something like let your adrenaline, get ragged so that you want to go after somebody and do who knows what to them? We're a perfect example of this type of behavior, that we go after one another. We lack the mindful awareness of like, what the hell am I doing? I'm going to go after this person because I'm angry at them. And what we're seeing playing out right now, what I'm seeing in a lot of these protests and a lot of these rallies all over the world, that there is, tremendous emotional, heat going on. It's anything but present moment awareness. It's anything but the practice of mindfulness. It's the complete antithesis of that. You've got emotions raging. You've got people who want to go after each other. I mean, it's like bloodthirst,
Yeah, definitely.
As I said, it's the complete antithesis of mindful awareness.
Okay, it totally makes sense, and I do. And actually, JJ has some questions first, but I do feel. Let me just say this really quick, JJ. I will actually do like self experiments, if you will, where I will keep a journal and not get on Twitter for like a day and see how I feel at the end of the day. And then I'll record how I feel when I get on it. And I've got to say, Twitter more than any of them, I get on there and I'm just ready to just kill. And I don't even know why. And I've learned another tool that I have is I've learned with Twitter is I save drafts before I tweet. And if it still seems like a good idea in the morning to send that tweet, then I will. I don't think it's ever been a good idea when I've tweeted angry. I've looked the next morning and I'm like, I am so glad I did not post that.
No, it takes, Brian, it takes a tremendous amount of discipline. And I'm really with you. We're all on social media right now, more than ever because there's so much going on in the world. And it's interesting. That in itself is a meditation. I do that. I practice it myself. I look at all these different posts, all the different, polarization and the narratives, the clashing of narratives. And it's if you just observe what your own body language is telling you. It's like someone says something that resonates for your particular narrative, and you sort of lean into that. Someone else is saying something that opposes your narrative, and you bristle. Well, put that on steroids because the posts are just on fire right now. How can we not go into reactive mode? It's really incredibly challenging.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point. And I wish I could have you on for 10 days. But what I wanted to actually, and I think that's a great segue into JJ. So, if you don't know JJ, he is a retired Border Patrol agent. He retired at a very high level. Dad was a famous Secret Service guy, and JJ, his book Invaded really gets into the granular details of what it is like down there on the border. And of course, I've been to the border, but not to the degree he was. He was cruising around leading an ATV team in the dark. When you read the book, one of the best things about that, my favorite things that he described was how the border is like a living creature.
Mm-hmm.
And it will eat the weak border agents, weak immigrants, everyone. And it kind of sets the stage for what his life might have been like. So, JJ, meet Ora, and I will let you have the mic.
Well, first, thank you for coming on our podcast. And I read many of your articles, and I'm very excited to just have a couple questions dating back to 2013, an article you wrote. But first, you were going down this path, and you mentioned civility. And in one of your, it was an article I wanted to read, but I couldn't download it. It wouldn't let me on. You go find an article someone wrote and it blocks you. But I just wanted to ask you, I believe that, and you just mentioned it previously, but my feeling is that there is an incredible lack of civility in the world today.
Yeah.
Maybe in America, it's so quick, you said, to jump down someone's throat or bristle at their words. Nobody says please or thank you. Now people won't hold doors for you, or I'll hold a door for someone and they walk by as if my whole sole purpose of life was supposed to hold the door for you at this moment, instead of just saying thank you. We're calling someone yes ma'am and no ma'am. I would just like to ask you, could you talk about, in one of your articles, you said the new era of civility through mindfulness. If you could just expand on that, because I think there's great value in civility.
Well, I think it's what you're saying, JJ, that we've really lost our compass about how to really behave with each other in a civil way. I've been longing for civil discourse. The last 3 years I kept saying, why can't we just have civil discourse with one another? What happened to respectfully disagreeing?
Yeah.
We are so polarized right now that we can't even listen to one another. And the level of disrespect, the level of rudeness is to the likes of which I don't ever recall seeing. Like what has happened to people? Have we reduced ourselves? Have we dehumanized ourselves? We accuse one another of dehumanizing one another. We are allowing ourselves to be dehumanized. And it's really disturbing, because I think to myself, how have we fallen from grace to such a low point in our humanity? I'm a perennial optimist, but I've never seen anything like this. And as you said, you hold the door open for somebody, you say, thank you, and you show them respect, which, by the way, I think we should do that even more, because we're so inclined not to, because everybody's on the defensive. I came up with this idea recently, and I it sounds a little bit, I don't know, perhaps abstract, but I feel like we've entered into enemy consciousness. I feel that we're living at a time where people are looking at each other not as an ally, not as a friend, but as an enemy. You could be a potential enemy. And you guys were talking earlier about there are groups of people that we've been traveling on this journey with for the last 3 years. It's like, oh, you're not pro-vaccine, I'm not pro-vaccine. And then all of a sudden, that same person is pro-Palestinian and you're pro-Israel. It's like, we keep like, coming to that fork in the road. It's a continuous fork in the road. We're like, I'm going this way, you're going that way. And it feels very divided. It feels very polarized. And it actually makes me feel like I'm swimming in a sea of sharks, and people are waiting to attack one another. So you talk about civility, JJ. I would love nothing more to believe that we can find our way back home again to civility. I hold that in my heart as a possibility.
Do you think the advent of, so let's go back, you've been doing this for decades, so let's go back to, say, 2010. Do you think the advent of Twitter, social media, looking at a screen, not even having to talk to someone or have let's talk about the vaccine. Like We would never say this, not me. I feel like everything I write, I would say to someone's face, because I believe that my words matter, and I just don't want to flippantly say something. But I know there's a lot of people that say things that would never say those things face to face, or they would at least give the individual some grace as they're talking and find some commonality and some common ground. Do you see social media, Twitter, the keyboard warriors? Do you think that's accelerated the lack of civility and the us against them?
Absolutely. I mean, social media is the great connector, but it's also the greatest weapon, that we
Yes.
can use against one another. It's very empowering for someone to be on their platform and be able to espouse whatever they want, even if it's full of hate, and
Yeah.
not be saying that to you if you were physically standing right next to them,
Right.
so that you might, go at each other's throats. Do you
Right.
know?
I always fall back on that quote by Mike Tyson, of all people, not the man of most civility, said the problem is that a lot of people have never been punched in the face before. And what he was saying was I'm not saying that this is how we got to live, but he was saying, just like we're talking about, you would never talk to me like that.
Right.
You would talk to me, Mike Tyson, 4,000 miles away on a keyboard, knowing that I'm never going to see you. But if you were standing in front of Mike Tyson, you would never make fun of him or say things like that. So I just believe civility it's almost a dying, it's a dying characteristic of America. I'll give you an example today that I take.
I so agree with you. I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
I think and I have a 12-year-old son, and I grew up. I was born in Massachusetts. My father's a Secret Service agent. We moved all over the place. So I really had my formative years in the Deep South, and everything was yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. That's just the way it was, and I've instilled that in my son. Even though I've lived in San Diego for 24 years before I moved to Kansas City, South Dakota, and Kansas City. But I've been instilling him, and it was interesting today before I came on, because I was doing my notes. I had to pick him up from school and take him to his allergist, and we were a new doctor. We're in a new state, and he's talking to the nurse, and he's yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, answering her questions, and she just stopped, and she said, "Do you know, son? Do you know how important it is, and how unique this is that you are so polite?" And it made me, as a father, I was like beaming, like I couldn't wait to go tell my wife. But when she left, I looked at him and I said, "Do you understand, son, civility, what we talk about constantly, being polite and kind and being respectful?" I said, "That takes nothing for you to do, but the rewards they're unlimited.
Yes.
If you could just be nice." And it's the same thing in school. People are making fun of this girl or that guy because they're whatever. I said, we never want to be those type of people, Joseph. Right? So I think civility is something that is dying. And then I read an article you wrote, because you started talking about World War III and the fear and the danger, right? We all, I believe, or we all believe that there's something wrong in the world. We can feel it.
Yes.
It could be a million things, but we can feel it. Like I'm watching you, listen to you talk about watching, I think it's Oregon in Turkey, talk about that. And I can see your body language, because you're like reliving it as you watch it. And you're like, I can't believe this is happening. But there's a darkness in the world. And you talk about this, and I want to go all the way back to 2013. You wrote an article on Sandy Hook Elementary. We don't have to discuss Sandy Hook, but it was what you said, and I want to quote it. You said, "Let's not be afraid to look darkness in the face and say, quote, you must end or we will die with you." I have my interpretation of that, what you wrote. And it's a long time ago, but do you remember writing that? And if you do, what context, or could you elaborate on you must end, talking to darkness and talking to evil, you must end or we will die with you? What were you trying to convey?
Yeah, that, hearing you read that back to me, the written words that I wrote, is powerful for me to hear it, coming from someone else. We are in a very dark time. We are. I know we all feel it, and it's pretty powerful. It's a very powerful time to be alive, and it's testing us big time. It's testing each and every one of us. Are we going to rise? Are we going to, be able to look at the monster in the face and say, that we are banishing it from our reality, that we will not help usher this darkness forward. And if we don't put an end to it, if we individually don't stand up to the darkness, then we are really allowing it to come in and be a part of that collective. And I do think each and every one of us are powerful enough to say to the darkness, to look at the monster in the face and say, no, you do not have power over me. You do not have power over my soul. I mean, we have to be able to rise and look at this in the face for what it is and say no and put an end to it and not allow for it. Do you know? And
Yes.
that's the time that we're in right now. And it's why it's so incumbent upon each and every one of us to stand up and to rise up and to resist this darkness that we know is upon us.
And I agree with you, and that's a great description of what we need to do for darkness. But I have to ask you, do you in your world and the people you speak to and your research that you do you feel as if people turn away from darkness just because they just want to live in their own bubble and they want to act as the boogeyman? He's over there. He's going to hurt the other street or neighborhood or another state. He's not here. Even though he's standing right next to you. No. He's not there. Have you come across? It's like a phenomenon.
I can give you a resounding yes. Absolutely. Do you know? I see it, and it's again, it's a very, very hard thing to see with your fellow man and woman, our humanity. My father lost his entire family in, the Holocaust. And I remember I would go to the museums, the memorials, and I would look at those pictures and I said, how could this have happened? What happened? How it just would boggle my mind. Even when I was a little girl, I could never wrap my head around it. And I know, Holocaust survivor and activist Vera Sharav talks about these times being like Nazi, Germany. And it's the closest thing we've seen. And I now understand how that happened, that people don't want to look at the monster. They don't want to acknowledge the darkness. They'd rather look away. Look what we just saw in the last 3 years. Everybody was desperate to get back to normal. What's normal? How can you tell if we ask people define what normal is today, or suddenly it's like the new normal? Well, what's the new normal? People would rather get back into life in a way that is pleasant, that is convenient. Right. It's convenient for them. They don't want to look at this darkness. Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, talked about the shadow. I feel as if we're living out the shadow of human existence right now. We cannot escape the fact that we are in the grips of this darkness, and we can no longer look away.
I agree. And I found this early in my career when I arrested, my teams would arrest just gang members, rapists, pedophiles, the hard narco smugglers, and just the average coyote, the smuggler, and how abusive they were to their cargo. They would call them the poyos. And people would ask me in the beginning of my career, well, tell me, what's it like? And I immediately realized they don't want to know what it's like. They live 10 miles from the border. I mean, it's not like I transport myself in a spaceship to go to a border on Mars. I'm like, Coronado, one of the wealthiest places in America, is literally 2 miles from the border. You can see the border. They didn't want to hear about it. They just wanted me to assure them that they were safe. But they weren't safe. But this disconnect is frightening. And it brings me to the final thing I want to ask, Brian, if you give me just 2 more minutes.
Take your time.
An article, you were interviewed in an article in 2019 by, and I hope I pronounced it right, it's Kivo Daily. And they asked you, can you give some advice And this, I'm going to quote what you said. It said, to view fear and difficulty as your greatest motivators for the work you do. And I found that fascinating because I retired from the Border Patrol. This is going many different levels. I retired, starting a podcast, wrote a book. I went way out of my comfort level, right? I was very regimented in my life. I knew I was the expert at what I was doing. People would come to me. I would have answers because I did it for so long. Then I went into a technical side of writing a book, getting a publisher, doing a podcast, and not being technically sound. And it's fearful. There were days and nights where I would go, okay, I'm going to hit send. Dear God, please let this be right. I don't even know what I'm doing. But it is a motivator if you can turn it that way. If you could say, okay, I'm going to overcome this. And when I overcome this, fear and difficulty on the other end, it's going to be a new world for me. Mm-hmm. If I can just get to the other side. But I believe that's the same thing in looking at the dysfunction of the world. And mm-hmm. could you just expand on that and tell me, when you say fear and difficulty, are you talking about work as well as, life change? Or is that also what you were talking about in societal chaos that's happening now?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, to be able to utilize that, to be able to, this is a very frightening time. It really is. But if we succumb to it, if we don't stand up to it, if we even don't acknowledge our own fear and let that infuse us with strength, turn fear into motivation, turn fear into intentionality, turn fear into igniting your vision of trying to be a part of the solution here. Do you know? This is a time we have to really, again, I use the word rise up. Do you know? It's not a time to cower. It's not a time to turn away from the darkness. It's a time to look at the darkness, acknowledge it, look the monster in the face and say, you are not going to win this battle. And we all have to do this together. We are all part of this.
I agree that it needs to be all of us, but as optimistic as I used to be, I'm more of a realist. And I would like to just hear your view on this. I don't believe it will be all of us. I would love it to be all of us. But I believe there's going to be a distinction about who is going to rise up and who are going to fall back and literally fall in the fetal position and say, please take care of me.
But all JJ doesn't mean everyone. All means all of us that are able to do that. I can't speak for those that are not. I can only join forces with those that can. So when I say I mean present company included, and those of us that are the all, we may not be everyone, but we are the all that will stand up to this.
Oh, that's perfect. I never even thought of articulating that way. And that's perfect by saying, hey, out of 100 people, there's 15 of us. I don't need 12 of those 15. I need all 15. And if we can reach back and help the 85, great. But us 15, we better be strong together.
Yeah, and imagine, I mean, you guys know this better than I do. Imagine you're on the front lines. You're literally facing your enemy. And maybe you're an army of I don't know how many. But you don't know who's dying around you. You know that you're still standing. So you're the army. Each and every one of us is the army. We're the all. I don't know about the rest of the all. And I can't really pay attention to the rest of the all. I can only join forces with those that are in my view of fighting this battle that we are all in right now. And so again, present company included, I'm talking to my all, and I know there are more of us and there will be more of us. And I know what trips me up sometimes is when I feel saddened by my humanity, those that are not part of the all that I want to believe I am a part of. Do you know?
Why do you think they won't? Why don't you think, what is the holding them back to being part of us, if you will, us?
You know what? I think there's a lot of fearful people out there in the world. I think we just saw that in the last 3 years during the insanity that took place. We saw people that were really frightened. They were in a heightened state of fear. They were very compliant. They wanted to believe. I mean, listen, I've talked to intelligent people that it's very hard for them. You say things like the government is corrupt, the health organizations are corrupt, Big Pharma is corrupt, and they look at you with like these wide saucer eyes, like, how is that possible? What are you saying? Everything's basically, you know what, up.
Yeah.
Is everything that we believed were the powers that be, that this is all really the epicenter of darkness. That's where it is. So
Mhm.
if we acknowledge that, then what do we have to hold on to? What do we believe in? I say believe in your own heart and soul and let it lead the way. And to take your son as a beautiful example, what does your son know? He only knows how to be polite. That's what he
Yeah.
knows. So, a mentor of mine, I don't know who the quote is by. One man with courage makes a majority. So let each and every one of us be that majority.
That's wow. That's well said. All of that's well said. I'm glad we're recording this, so I'll send you the transcript, and that way you have the rights to it. I'm sitting here with goosebumps, especially on the all definition. That helps a lot.
You guys, I want
That
to
helps a lot.
thank you, Brian and JJ. I want to just say, when I got on here and I saw that piece of news, on social media about the president of Turkey, I think we all feel, when I say all again, you know who I'm talking about.
Right.
Those of us that know, those of us that are awake, to really quote my book, it's like time to awaken. Those of us that are awake, if in fact we really are that close to World War III, which we may very well be, I know that something is very profound is being asked of each and every one of us, and I'm glad to be, on the front lines with you guys and those of us
Yeah.
that are.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk to just a little bit about what JJ you were asking, like why aren't other people there? And Ora kind of said something that we all see, is that, what do you mean this is evil? What are you talking about? I did a lot of work in kind of a propaganda related field when I was a government contractor, without getting too much in the details. But back then, I forgot what we called them. But now, if you're familiar with the term feedback loop, this could explain it. The huge, and stop me if you guys know this or you disagree or you want to add to it, but because I certainly want to hear Ora's thoughts, and yours of course too, JJ. But what a feedback loop is in social media terms is that your sentiments, your posts, everything you talk about is getting fed to people that are saying kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they are fed to you. That's why you get those people you should follow, that sort of thing. They're creating these bubbles.
Right.
So you're all in agreement. And a great example of, like, and I think just an accidental feedback loop is too. Twitter, when Jack Dorsey was running it, because they would just ban everyone that disagreed with the narrative. And it created this massive feedback loop. So they're all hearing the same news. Hey, this guy JJ said this is happening, and yeah, I heard that guy. He's full of it. And enough people say that, you start believing, okay, he must be crazy. Think about how many people hated Trump before they even knew anything about him, at every age. And then another one is and I love Gettr, but Gettr is kind of the same thing. Now, they don't censor anyone, as far as I know, but you really get a lot of people agreeing with you pretty easily on Gettr, and it's nice. I mean, don't get me wrong; it's kind of nice to have that spot. Everyone's welcome, but I do find myself back on the new X just to hear different opinions. But then I actually have to use different accounts with different tweets, tweeting things I would never tweet as myself, to create new feedback loops to see the reality that others are seeing. And or you'd mentioned they look at you with that face like, what are you talking about? You crazy? And it's, I run into this with members of my, well, I'll just like people that are in my son's family, great people. But, one person said, hey, do you hear Asian American hatred is on the rise? Now, that started hitting the news about 2021. And it was bogus. And they were just looking for, it happened, Asian American hate started going on the rise, according to the media, right around the time Biden took over and signed all these executive actions that favored China. And I think they were moving towards a censorship of talking bad about China, meaning talking bad about the Chinese Communist Party, and trying to set that up. But it filtered into the regular population, where people are, I hear Asian American hate is on the rise, and then they see it in the Boston Globe and the New York Times, and they start believing it. And that's how covert influence works, is taking over the reality, taking over even the rhythms that people can barely hear, that are actually coming out of those little garbage cans you pass by with those solar panels. And this is not hocus pocus, this is a thing. But I asked this person, I said, wait, where did you hear that? Mm-hmm. And she said, well, on the news. I said, where do you get your news? And she said, Alexa. And I was like, so who owns Alexa, right? So she very proudly came to me the next time I saw her, and I said, how's it going? She's like, yeah, I don't know if you're right about that Asian American hate not really being on the rise. And I said, you still listening to Alexa? She said, no, I actually picked up actual news. I was watching CNN and I picked up the New York Times. I was like, oh, God. Okay. But they don't know. See, the thing is, we do this all day long. Even before the pandemic, I was paid to not only mess with media, but also to understand media and information. As an intelligence analyst, you're getting tons of information. You have to sift through it, and you come up with processes. So I default into checking sources, picking up on quotes. But imagine if you're, that 14-hour day accountant, single mom, or that like my dad, he's up on the roof with a hammer and nails after he works in the donut shop from 4 a.m. till 3 p.m. And you just don't have time. So you have what's fed to you, because you just don't have the energy to look into it.
Yeah, I mean, but Brian, when we were in that crazy period over the last 3 years, I found myself on social media really, I didn't want to just listen to people that agreed with me or had the same viewpoints or opinions that I have. And I found myself following people that I normally wouldn't follow. I was like, let me kind of go over here and hear what this person has to say. And on my, sort of going down different rabbit holes, I remember when I don't know how she popped up on my feed, was Candace Owens. And she did a video that went viral about her take on George Floyd. And it was so radical. I was like, whoa, this is pretty amazing. Here is.
Are you talking about that whole movie she did?
No, this is way in the very
way back. Yeah.
Wow.
And you could probably pull it up and find it. And I was just blown away by, first of all, here's, a Black woman, Republican, was a liberal at one time in her life. And she is so bold, talking about the whole kind of idea of how her culture views somebody like George Floyd, and raise them up to kind of idol worshiping. I mean, she really pushed the envelope, in ways that I learned so much about her, a culture that's different than mine. I want to learn. I want to know about things that I don't know about. And it really blew my mind, and I think, most people go and turn on their news. They get it regurgitated back to them again and again and again. I had somebody who's a good friend of my husband's, a friend of ours, when I was doing one of my first fundraisers for Bobby Kennedy, he wrote me a letter like he was slapping my wrist for it, like commanding me. And he gives me, your as Brian, the very predictable whole thing about Bobby. Oh, I hear he's an anti-vaxxer.
The key word, I hear.
I hear, it's like telephone. By the time it comes down to the fifth person, they don't even know what the original person said. And I said to him, and I said I was very mindful in my response to him, but at one point I did sneak in. I said, "You sound like you're reading from a CNN teleprompter." Do you know? He admitted to me. He apologized, and he said, "You're right. That's where I get my news. That's my source of news." So
Yeah.
we know how auto-hypnotic that is. We know how it feeds into us the same things over and over again. That's what most people believe, and that's what they end up. We divide each by and polarize one another, because you're listening to Fox, I'm listening to CNN, and it's so small thinking. I think everybody should change. Like you go to a dinner party and you change people. Let a Republican sit next to a Democrat. Everybody should just switch it up. Are we that predictable? I mean, it's so boring.
You're right. It is. And it's funny you say that, because we used to, when I first met Naomi, she was working on a book. And so she was, I think they called her an extraordinary fellow at Oxford. So we stayed at the Rhodes House for 3 months. It was great. And she asked me, "Do you want to go to Oxford for 3 months?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I want to go to Oxford for 3 months." But we had to sing for our supper. And part of that was we had to go to these things called high table. So high table is kind of like if you've ever seen, what is it, Harry Potter, and all the professors sit at that high table, and then there's the rows of students. The high table is a very honorable thing. Really honored to have been there. But we had the Baroness Helena Kennedy, who's a friend, and we'd go to Manchester, that college, and she would purposely. Like she loved, I almost think she really enjoyed changing it up, like you said, because every time Naomi was seated, she'd be near two people that totally would not, at the time, be people Naomi would agree with. It was like one guy's a defense contractor, and then the other guy is, in favor of something she's spoken out against. And then she would put me next to the zoologist poetry expert and something else, and you have to sit, you're polite, but it was really, really fun, because you did learn things that you'd never learned before, and it makes you more interesting too, because it's easier, I find, to listen to people that you don't agree with, because you're either trying to, maybe your intent is to maneuver and show them how dumb they are, or maybe your intent is to really figure out why they feel this way. But what I find is, no matter what your intent, you find yourself really just listening to the person and learning about them, and your intent dissolves. And now you step away.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said, JJ. It goes back to, trying to exercise civil discourse. Can we really sit with somebody who has such differing opinions than we have, and beliefs or political views, and really have a civil conversation with them? Without rejecting each other, and without judging each other? Can we really just sit there? One of the things that I said to a friend of mine recently about what's going on right now, I feel like we're listening to all of these leaders speak about defending their countries. Wouldn't it be great if they could sit around a table and talk? I mean, I'm hearing everybody talk about suddenly everybody's a scholar and historian about Israel. It's like, do you know the movie Rashomon, Kurosawa's Rashomon? Did you guys ever see Rashomon? It's a great movie. You should watch it. It's a movie, and it's got 4 different viewpoints about a murder and a rape. And you have complete 4 different realities about what happened. And I feel like I'm watching a version of Rashomon, that everybody's got here's the gospel according to who. And, why is it so hard to sit around a table and have civil discourse and be able to hear what one another has to say about something? Why is it so why is it off limits? Why is not even allowed for? If you're not censoring, you're not canceling people, you definitely are not going to sit down with your enemy and have a conversation. I would love to hear people be able to differ their opinions with each other. Going back to what you said, JJ, not just on your platform where you can just espouse and pontificate whatever you want, and it might not even, be steeped in reality, and, accuse somebody else that their reality is different than yours. This is, it's what I said in my book. We're living in a parallel universe. We're like walking around with different realities and trying to coexist.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that we're more divided than maybe ever in our history. And like you said, I will align with somebody that's, let's just say, for closed borders, and then that person believes in full term abortion, whatever. I'm just making this up. But you see that we start getting splintered. And then we just have these very small, balkanized groups where, okay, we all believe in the 100 things, and this is our group, and we can't listen to this group. And it just feels as if, for me, especially from a white male, even though I was born in Massachusetts and a Yankee, I'm down the South. So people say, well, where'd you grow up? Well, I grew up in the South. So a big white guy, there's that immediate, that white privilege, and he's a racist, and I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. You don't even know anything about me. You just say that I'm a racist. You don't even know that I'm part Blackfoot Indian. My great grandfathers made up my name Carrell because they wanted to buy land in West Virginia, and only white people could buy land then. So they made up my name. Just the assumptions that people make now is amazing.
I know. It's like, I feel like, is this some kind of tribal marker thing that we do with one another? Like,
it's crazy.
We look at each other and go, it's like apes, we're like, I mean, at this point, please, calling a friend, what part of the brain are we using? Because I've lost the plot here. I don't get it. Have we not evolved to something much more refined and intelligent than the way in which
I think we've regressed. I really do. I think the information highway, the internet, and everything, I think it's wonderful. I think it's amazing that I can get information at a drop of a hat. I can fact check it real quick, and I can determine what it is and what it's not. But as in everything in life, nothing is 100% good. There's a downfall to it, right? Everybody likes a cold beer, or like I like to drink a green Monster. Love a green Monster. I can't drink a 6-pack of green Monster. I'm going to die, right? You do it in moderation. It tastes great, but there's a problem to it, right? There's all this whatever. But I think social media has made us regress. And I'll give you a great example, and maybe you can comment on this, or maybe this is something that you've done research on in mindfulness and civility, is something that I think has a profound impact. And it was interesting because I had a conversation with a young woman that's unmarried. She's single. She's in her 30s. And we just started talking. She was at the doctor's office and somehow got onto, like, we were talking about civility and dating. And she was like, thank God. I said, thank God I'm married. I don't even know how you do this now with the dating apps. She goes, people don't even ask you out. They don't even converse with you. It's text messaging, or I'll meet you over here maybe, because everyone is afraid of fear and difficulty and rejection. But I think that has to have a profound impact on the world we live in today. Do you think that?
Listen, there's so much we could cover, the three of us. I've heard people say that's not our reality because we're not on the dating sites. But I've heard someone, I think it's called something like texting insults. Like, someone can text you and you get insulted by the tone of their text, and then you ghost them.
Well, no,
you cannot make stuff up. You just cannot.
You can't.
And the worst part about that is the whole cell phone culture. Is I remember when I first texted, I was in the Philippines, like in a combat zone, and I had a little phone, and I was texting someone, one of my Filipino counterparts, and I was like, "Oh, this is really kind of cool," like, "Oh, we're texting. What are you doing? You're texting." And I was like, but I never thought like that would be our life. And what I was going to say is the danger of texting is
Mhm.
your battery dies, and it's always when you just said something, you haven't had a chance to put in the context, and your phone dies, and then the person doesn't talk. Like, this doesn't happen to me because I force it. I'll call them, I'll say, hey. But you have to do that because the texting's terrible. You might hit an autocorrect, shut that off, because I think there's some little nerd having fun with that one. But the thing is, it's like, I wonder how many rifts are caused just from hitting the wrong button or losing your signal.
So these are the times that we're in, you guys, and I think that things like that, dating sites, and there's just so much, reality TV. That was the decline of civility
Ugh.
right there. I mean, you're watching people do all sorts of crazy things in real time. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing,
Yeah.
there's no refinement, there's nothing
Mhm.
that, there's no mystery, there's no wondering, there's no guessing. The art of mystery has just suddenly vanished. It's like we're
Yeah.
everything. It's like exposing everything on reality TV so people can compare their reality to what the Kardashians. I mean, we've seen a precipitous decline, haven't we?
Yeah.
For quite some
Mhm.
for quite some
Well,
time.
if I can jump in really quickly, or at this point, I need to answer some of these comments because people have a lot of questions for you.
Excuse me,
And
Brian. You have two things from Daily Clout Rumble on there. Could you remove those for me to see it because it's blocking the comments? Do you see that up there, or is that just mine?
I think it might be you.
All right,
I
don't
can't
worry
really.
about it. Keep going.
Yeah, I can't.
Don't
Do
worry about it.
you have the comments going? You
Yeah,
have it
go ahead.
selected?
Go ahead.
Okay. Um, so yeah, so let me see. Let me get down here. Usually we answer these earlier. Ernie Jansen, by the way, my actual cousin, is on the stream. It's so cool. I also want to give a shout out to Santana. That is my barber at a place called Royal Blends with a Z. And
Is he a new sponsor?
well, not
No, that's
Santana,
a
but
free one. Okay.
Royal
I'm
Blends
just
with a
I'm just
Z.
teasing. I'm just teasing. Go ahead.
And anyone on the chat is welcome to look it up. It's in Salem, Massachusetts. I want to say really quickly, I love going to this place, and I'll tell you why. The barbershop is what I don't know how it is for women, but like with men, you find a good barbershop. It's a bunch of dudes talking. The haircut takes forever. You can't be in a rush. And it's the best. And what I really like about these guys is, it's like two Dominican guys and one guy from the Bronx or so, I don't know. But no matter what time it is, you call them and they always say this thing that I love. They're always like, I got you, brother. I got you, brother. Like, we close at 8, but I'll keep it open for you. I know you need a haircut, man. Haircuts make people feel good.
Okay,
And
that's civil. That's civil to me. I
Yeah.
love. I got
Yeah.
you, brother. I got you, brother. I got you, sister. That's civil discourse for me.
love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And it's just, and they're even nice to the homeless guys that come in and are really annoying. And they're like, nah, man, nah, we're not going to do this again. Tell you what, you come back next Wednesday just so I could come up with a more creative way to say no. But in the meantime, here's a Starbucks card. Go get yourself a coffee. I mean, it's super nice guys.
Yeah.
And I think everyone should find that place, find that place. And there's an old article, Ora and JJ, that I'll send you, but it was actually in GQ back in the 90s, and it was called The Good Life. And The Good Life, as they explained in this article, it was several things, like own one good pair of shoes. Pair of shoes you normally couldn't afford, but save up for them. Make sure you have that one good pair of shoes. Have that woman, whether it's your wife or a pinup girl, whatever, that you just worship like a goddess. That there's another one that said, wake up early in the morning so you have time to make a cappuccino instead of just slurping down a coffee. And then the best was the Macanudos and Sandman port. With an old friend, they recommended 2 to 3 bottles of Sandman port. And the author of the article said, it's interesting how well you can write when you're drunk and how hard it is to read it when you're sober. And I love that. So I think that's like part of my little good life portfolio is Royal Blends. And just going down there and I just love hanging out there. And even if you have to wait, just love hanging out there. It's a great place. And I recommend everyone find that one little place that you're not going to get work done. You're not going to be on your phone,
That's right.
and you're just going to enjoy it. And it's a lot of fun. Comments. All right. So Ernie says, went off on somebody who rear-ended me last week until an 81-year-old man got out of the car and said, "I'm so sorry. I was blinded by the sun."
Oh.
All right, Ora, that's not a question. Comments on that. What do you think happened there? What was learned there, I guess?
Well, I have to say, for me, like when you're about to put your hand on the horn, sometimes what comes up in my mind is this an old person that's driving slow? Because we're also used to zipping around. We can't drive fast enough to get to the next place. And going back to mindfulness, we can't be in the present. We want to be as fast in the future as we possibly can be. So yeah, you get out of the car, you see it's an older person, and you know what I mean? You don't know who you're going to encounter, and you really want to look at what's going on in your head when you're feeding yourself all of these thoughts of anger and even rage that could, propel you into a rage war with somebody. To really stop and, take that breath and go, whoa, what am I doing? I'm really on automatic right now. I'm really in reactive mode. And, to get out of the car, imagine you just, laid on the horn, and then you pull up next to the person, you see it's a, little old lady. It doesn't feel so good.
Well, we've talked about this, is the civility and the danger and the fear and the chaos in the world. Wouldn't it be great if we all just gave each other just a little bit of grace? Because if we're feeling this, and I think we're three intelligent people that have been successful in life. If we're feeling this pressure, whatever we can call it, but the pressure of the world, then everybody must be feeling it on some level. So if we just gave each other just a little grace, just a little bit, and maybe instead of, like you said, instead of bristling at a comment or a way somebody looks at you, maybe don't take it so personal and just show me a little grace, or I need to show people more grace.
Absolutely. I'm telling you, we need it now more than ever. We really do.
Because we're going to kill each other. We are.
Yeah.
And part of me, and this is a topic I want to talk about, is if you have time, I somehow, I think a lot of this is by design. I mean, this level of hatred for total strangers is just beyond. And we'll get to that in a second. Let me really quickly read Alyssa C, by the way, who is a loyal. Okay, by the way, guys, we changed the name again. It's now Mostly Peaceful Unrestricted. So we're getting there. I think that's going to be the final.
That's it.
It started as Mostly Peaceful Unrestricted Invasion Edition. Then it was Mostly Peaceful Unrestricted Invasion, and now it's Mostly Peaceful Unrestricted. So we're there. Alyssa, my friend and I disagreed on the vaccine, and we stopped talking for 2 years. Just recently, I texted her a birthday wish, but we now know the boundaries of conversation because we care about each other. So we have chosen to agree to disagree and feel the friendship, which is hugely important. And actually, Alyssa started that with, we are self-censoring. So, Ora, it sounds like there was some self-censoring going on to preserve the friendship. Is that healthy? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's a really fine line between feeling like you have to self-censor, or walk on eggshells, or not be able to talk about the elephant in the room with somebody to preserve a friendship. And I think that we have to really ask ourselves, what are we willing to be honest about? What are we willing to risk at this moment in time? There are people that can maintain friendships. There are people that chose to be vaccinated, people that didn't get vaccinated, and they're able to keep that out of the conversation. I think that's challenging, because I think that the elephant in the room has only gotten larger. Do you know? So for me personally, it's getting harder to be with somebody who our feelings or our perceptions of how we see the world right now are so diametrically opposed that where's the common ground that we're meeting? And that in itself could be an exercise. Do you love somebody enough? Do you treasure the friendship enough to preserve it, that you can work through it? You can navigate the difficulties of having differing opinions to maintain a friendship. That's a personal decision. I think that's something that you have to ask yourself, because I know that we have been so polarized. People have lost so many friends. There are people that are estranged from family members. I mean, it's like by design. We are so polarized.
Yeah, that's true. I'm kind of glad my family really of anything, so like they don't get mad about anything. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I know.
And that's a great answer to that too.
Yeah.
Revman Solution. Revman Solution, by the way, I've scrolled through like a dozen of your messages, which are all profound. I know they're profound because I don't understand them. We'll get back to those. I do. I want to string them together. It's like poetry reading this one, but so Revman Solution asks, Ora, do you think, quote, chosen one mentality, unquote, is the antithesis to, quote, all men are created?
All men are created equal? Is there a missing part of that?
That's
I think it's missing. Yeah, he didn't write it out. All men are created.
Maybe equal.
So chosen mentality. Okay, so now we're getting a little metaphysical. So chosen mentality. I don't know. Do you guys want to help weigh in on that with me?
JJ.
I read that. I don't know what he means. I don't know what he's asking.
I don't
Revman Solution.
Revman, can you flesh
out? And while he's waiting on that, I'd like to ask Ora just a question or some help, because I think this is something that many people go through. But can you give us just like a quick something we could do to become mindful, like to draw ourselves in? Like I'll sit down and I have my two screens and Brian's texting me and I'm texting him and people are calling me and I have to have this article's got to be done and I got to go on this podcast next. And sometimes I feel, and I know other people feel this way, I feel inefficient. I feel like, yeah, I'm juggling all that, but I'm not getting anything done. And a couple hours pass and I'm like, man, why can't I get centered? Why can't I get, and then I will figure it out, but time has passed. Do you have anything you can give to us to come more? I don't know if the right term is centered.
For some of my favorite mindfulness tips, and it's like what I call my little like mindfulness toolkit, a breath, literally to be able to, first of all, that self-awareness, JJ, to go, wow, I am so scattered. I'm being pulled in so many directions. I've got to get so much done. I'm feeling bada bing, bada boom. I gotta do all this stuff all at once. When I feel that way, I can start to feel it somatically. I can start to feel it viscerally. You're going to feel it in the body. Do you know? So what I like to do is I like to like literally take a couple of deep breaths. That sounds pretty simple to do, but I can't tell you it's grounding, it's centering. And if you have even a little bit more time, like to say, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to go out and I'm going to take a mindful walk. And Brian, you've got a beautiful area to do that, to be able to literally, even if you take off your shoes and go out the grass under your feet and really get earthed, is so helpful. It completely grounds you. And then you can go back in and you're centered, you're grounded. It's very hard. It's very easy, I should say, to dissipate the energy because we're really in multitasking mode. And sometimes you're not getting anything done, or you feel like you're not really completing individual tasks at an optimum. Do you know? So I love the breath. The breath is my friend. It's like taking a deep breath in and letting it out, like taking some really deep breaths in and letting it out. You suddenly go like, wow, I feel I'm centered. And this is like literally mindfulness 101 is mindful breathing. Do you know? We're so crazy busy right now, you guys. We've got a moment to go, time out here And whether you're putting your devices down, which we've got to do at one point, I mean,
Mhm.
shame on any of us that are on those things into the wee hours of the morning. Like, that's a no-no, you know?
Yeah, and
I
isn't
agree.
there something, Aura, to about posture as well, and checking your posture? Something as simple as that. That's what I've heard. I don't know if there's any.
I agree with that. I mean, I think it's very easy to sort of suddenly find yourself, especially when you're on your computer and you're on your devices and you're slouching over and you don't feel that upper body strength. Do you know?
Mm,
Well, there's a lot you could do. I mean, there, jumping jacks, mindful
Yeah.
walking, literally do deep breathing. Count, mindful breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out. It's so easy just to get centered to be able to do that, and not to come up with an excuse not to do it. I just don't believe we have to stay in that hamster wheel all the time.
yeah,
But
and
we feel as if
JJ,
we're in that hamster wheel.
I wonder if, because we had very similar lives, really. I mean, you came from a kind of military regimented professional background into self-employment, and so did
Yeah.
I. And it was an easier transition for me because being in special forces, you kind of did what you wanted. They'd say,
Yeah.
get this done, and then you'd figure out with a few guys how to do it. And then I went into government contracting. But it's still hard, is what I find. Um, trying to make a schedule, because we're used to having a schedule to stick to it and having
Yeah.
action items and that sort of thing. I unfortunately don't have a solution. I go through the same thing daily, but I think Aura she hits on something that really, really has helped me, and that's just not worrying if that thing you're going to do, like the breathing or the walk, really contributes to anything you're trying to accomplish. So, for instance, in the middle of the pandemic, I had a lot of work, and then I was also obsessed with trying to get through all the BS, because right away I'm like, this is garbage. There's something going on here. And but then I had all these cameras and devices from my work as a private investigator. I'd been on an Indian reservation for 3 years, and like for every 2 weeks, and they would buy me anything I needed for that job. One of those things was this remote control car, like this RC car that called Traxxas, that can go really fast, like 70 miles an hour. And I use that because I'd have to get onto these big, huge Native American pieces of property and not get shot. And if I was, looking at my client's opposition, and so I took these cars, I covered them with burlap, like a ghillie suit, and a GoPro, and I would move it out, and it had good range to the receiver. Well, during the pandemic, I just took one out and just started racing it around. Man, it felt good. Then I kind of got into it. And when I'll never forget this, I went to the track, and I didn't realize, like, Traxxas and this RC car thing is huge. Like, a lot of these Formula One guys in Abu Dhabi have switched to RC cars. And I went to the Traxxas dealer, because there's a lot of them. And there were a bunch of dudes in suits, like kind of laughing, joking, jockeying, and they kind of look like lawyers, like young lawyers. And I asked them, I said, what are you guys doing here? I'm wearing my, Captain America shirt and my jeans, and I got my 9-year-old at the time, and they're like, oh no, we have races at the firm. And what they were doing is, these lawyers, this big law firm, they were into Traxxas, and the boss loved it, and he forced all his people to half an hour a day, not during their lunch, half an hour a day. They all had to race their Traxxas cars, and they said it was the best stress reliever. So I think just having that thing, that's, and that's not your son's thing or your wife's thing, not my son's thing or my daughter's or my wife's thing, but your thing. And whether that's staring at a tree, I mean, whatever it is, collecting rocks. I found, and I find when I don't do those things, and I haven't done those things in a while because I broke a shock absorber, or I just got lazy, or I got really depressed, and I was like, but it was Naomi that pointed it out to me. She's like, I really want you. She's by the way, great wife, because she's like, I really want you to play with your toys again, because you're always very happy when you're messing around with those things. And she was right. So I did. And the same with her. She loves her bike rides, listening to her Janis Joplin, and that sort of thing. And so if you're not doing that, I mean, I don't know if it'll work for you, but I will say it works for me, is just anything. It doesn't even matter.
I so agree with you, Brian. We have to find, to me, it's a meditation. And I say all things are a meditation, even what you just described, because what are you doing? You're focusing on something. Even mindfulness meditation is, whether you're using a mantra, whether you're literally, and again, that's why mindfulness is not just sitting in meditation. It's saying, I'm going to use this as my meditation, meaning I'm in the present, I'm doing this activity, and I'm fully present with it. I'm not breaking the yoga of my mind. I'm really right there with what I'm doing. And I think we all need that. We need a break with all the monotony that's going on, that we could take something and go, you know what, this is my meditation. And I use that a lot. I tell that to people that are, people don't have to be a meditator, because you could turn anything into a meditation. And what that means is that you are in the moment with the very thing that you're doing, and you're not breaking your concentration. You're very focused on it. And it's a very powerful mental discipline. It really is. I highly recommend it. Not everybody meditates. Not everybody does yoga. And that's the beauty of mindfulness, is that you can literally utilize present moment awareness with everything that you do. That means you're really present when you're talking to somebody. You're really present when you're eating. You're really present when you're doing that the control of that car that you were describing. It's really, I love the whole idea of mental discipline. I think it's so valuable. And in a world that feels very chaotic right now, to have something where we can really zero in on something and really give it our full attention is the type of mental discipline that I feel will really help us out in the world.
Yeah, and I think it reminds you of what you're fighting for. And I gotta say, I'm just humbled by JJ's work discipline and his regimen. Because there's been a few times where I'm like, yeah, man, I'm pretty wiped out. I don't think I could do this cast tonight. And he just gives me the look, and he's like, it's a cross between seriously and also that really sucks. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, all right, I'll do it. All right. But this for me, this just talking about what's in our heads and talking to people like you, Ora, and this small community we're growing here, I love this. I'm always pumped up when I get off these live streams. And so that for me has also been something I needed, because it's one of the things now I look forward to it. And I'm pumped up all day. And JJ, I could almost say that I've seen you seem more optimistic, and positive. Every time he's just calling me today, he's like, dude, I'm pumped. We got this. And it's great, so.
It is great.
And JJ, do you have a thing you do?
My thing is I work out. I think that it's a stress reliever, right? You do it. And I'm not I can't do workout for forever. I'm not that guy that goes for 3 hours. I'm 45 minutes to an hour, just go. But you feel better and it can be anytime, middle of the day, at the end of the day. I think physical activity, I think that's something that's lacking in America. We're morbidly obese as a nation. I don't know if you guys have seen this. This is California, and it was in the 50s, I think it was. President Kennedy wanted physical fitness to be paramount. And they took I don't know where, I can't remember. I just saw this, dang it.
It's probably on the Tucker Carlson thing.
Maybe it was. And he showed that these schools broke down and all boys, and they did physical education because boys learn differently than girls do, and boys are more physicality and getting out there. Dude, you were looking at guys that were 15 to 18 in high school. They looked like they were on the movie set of 300. They were shredded, but it wasn't like that's all they did. That was the education they built around, and they thrived, and then they just didn't do it anymore. And now you have people that are morbidly obese in America. And I think it's the social media. I think it's, the whole different topic, the food we eat. But I do think that everybody needs that one thing, and whatever that is. But I agree with you, Ora, that I think, and I pray to God I'm wrong, but I think 6 months, a year, 18 months from now, I think we're going to look back as crazy as today is and wish we were in today. That's how crazy I see the future becoming. And everything shows that way.
Yeah.
If we could,
you're looking at,
oh, I'm sorry. If we could just hold that thought, just so I don't want anyone to feel neglected on the chat. But looking back, and I fear that too, because they have the saying about work. They say, what are the two best jobs in the world? And that's the one you just left and the one you're going to. Yeah. But maybe, I don't know, maybe with mindfulness and being in the moment,
we're not present. We are, I think there was a study saying out of Harvard, and then I'm thinking like all the protests that are happening on Harvard right now. It's sort of bizarre, but that our mind wanders over 50% of the time. So where does it go? Well, we're either lamenting the past and trying to, redo what we've done, and the past is no longer here. It's come and gone. It's over. Or we're anticipating the future and what might or could happen. So think of the two time frames that we spend most of the time in. We're anxious about the future of what might happen, and we're bitching about the past that's come and gone. And we have the hardest time being in the here and now. Like, what are we trying to like sneak out of the here and now for? It's like trying to like sort of like walk themselves out of the moment. It's like, excuse me, I'm in the moment. It's like, what are you so afraid of?
You might be hitting on a really good point that we've been, we're always trying to, unravel these mysteries of like what is going on with us, what's going on with, feeling bad about not getting your work day accomplished, or even, what's going on with these kids. And I can imagine if you are, focused on social media and thinking ahead and saying, I can never be that, or I'll never be that successful, that sort of thing, you're depressing yourself all day. Not you, JJ, but like people, you see people do this.
Yeah.
And, and because they're not in the moment. So, it's like mindfulness could save your life if you're suicidal or heading that way because you think it's just not worth it or anything like that. It literally could save your life.
Yeah, I think we have to ask ourselves, why do we not value the moments that we're in? What's that about? Why are we so uncomfortable being in the moments that we're in and trying to escape them all the time? Do you know?
Yeah. Would you assign some of that, not blame, but just some to this fantasy that's fed to us in TV, movies, and now on Twitter and Facebook? Everyone takes that 1 second shot of their life that looks so beautiful and they post it, and everyone assumes that person's living this life, and it's a fire dumpster, the 99%, the other 99%. So do you think there is maybe not living in the moment? I'm just asking this question, is not living in the moment because that we're always looking at, I need to improve, I need to have a better life, I need to have more money, I need to have a six-pack ab, I got to have a nicer car. My son's not doing well.
I don't think there's anything wrong to aspire, to want to do better, be better. Let's be better human beings rather than to aspire to have more things. Why don't we aspire to be better human beings? You know what I mean? Let's start with that rather than to compare ourselves to others that, they have more than I do. How about if I start with, how can I be a better human being? Do you know?
I agree with that.
Wasn't Sheryl Crow that said it's not, was that line in her song? It's not getting what you want, it's wanting what you got.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this circles back to what we were talking about earlier with, I think a lot of what we're witnessing that's really coming to the surface about our humanity is that the way in which we've been living for so long has been really not valuing what's important. And
yes,
far too much importance on things that really, do they matter? Do you know? I mean, that makes us these greedy people on the planet.
Yep.
And we're seeing this greed personified in all areas of life. And that greed is the bane of human existence. That greed, whether we're seeing it in, the political arena, or we're seeing it with, in the, with the global elites or the powers that be, whoever the puppet masters are. It's like, I feel like we've reached this point where we have not done the work on ourselves. There isn't a mindful awareness of self. We've projected it outside of ourselves onto others, and you go into the comparing. Then we have social media, and we're comparing ourselves to others, and we haven't done the work on ourselves. And it's just imploding at this point. Do you know?
Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
Do you think
got
that?
another-
I'm sorry.
JJ,
go ahead,
I'm
Brian.
sorry. Can I let me read a couple more?
Yes, go ahead.
Hold that thought. You got the mic next. Ernie, cousin Ernie, which is so cool. Like, quick story. One of my favorite movies of all time, because the one-liners are to die for and they're the best in the world, is The Last Boy Scout with Bruce Willis. And one of my fondest memories was hanging out with cousin Ernie and Andrea and everyone up in New York, upstate New York, where now I live half the time, and watching that movie. And I don't know why, but it's just every time I see that movie, it makes me super happy. It's probably not the best movie in the world, but I just love that movie because it takes me back to a good time. So when I see Ernie, it instantly like anchors me to very happy moments. So it's good to see him on here. And a good one-liner, he says, he's a tough ex-Secret Service guy, and he's, going to protect this girl, Halle Berry. And the boyfriend comes out, who I think is one of the Wayans brothers, and he says, hey, man, you ever play football? And he goes, what are you? He's like, are you gay or something like that? And he goes, no, man, I'm just trying to break the ice. And he says, well, I like ice. Leave it the fuck alone. It's those kind of lines to the whole thing. It's great. So, but Ernie asks, should you just avoid someone who's so far to the other side that there is no middle? Great question.
That's a really good question. And, I have to say, and I've got to be a little bit subjective, to be honest, I don't think any of us have any time to waste right now. I think our time is important and precious. And I think that if you really are living your truth, your authenticity, your authentic self, which I write about in Live True, Be True to the Authentic Self, I don't think you should compromise what feels authentic for you right now, especially because the stakes are so high. Again, it's like, does that feel authentic to you, that you can say, well, I can't really say this to this person. I can't really be myself in front of this person. I've got to just sit, shove it down. I've got to thwart what I'm really feeling. I have to really, silence myself. I personally don't want to do that. I don't. I think, having these conversations, like what the three of us are having, I say, let's get real. It's time to get real.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'd rather sit around with a group of people where we don't have to just be mimicking each other, or we don't have to agree because we think we have to agree. It's because we find ourselves at the same place at this moment in time. And it's incredible. It's like, being around like-minded, and I don't mean that in a self-serving kind of way, but I get more out of being around people that we're awake to what's going on the planet right now. And we can have these great conversations and these think tank moments together where we can really cultivate and use our minds in ways that are intelligent. I want to have those conversations today.
Yeah.
Yep.
And,
I agree.
Alyssa C said 100%. We also look forward to our Tuesdays and Thursdays together. That JJ, to me, that's success. We've won. We've accomplished.
That's beautiful. So you guys are doing that. You're putting it into motion. It's like, these kinds of conversations, and you guys, holding space for that so that you can have that civil discourse, and you could talk about things that are really important and valuable right now, that are really going to give people food for thought, and it's going to help wake them up even more. This is the call to action. Is like, let's wake up, people. It's time.
And that's a good way. Go ahead, JJ. Sorry.
No, I was just saying I agree, and I think that and you said something previously that made me laugh because it happens to me quite a bit too. Is you you were describing some conversations that you have, and you're laying out like Big Pharma and the government's corrupt, and people are looking at you with these glass eyes like, what are you talking about? I find myself in that, and that's when I tell myself, okay, have some grace, right? Not everyone is reading what you're reading and knowing what you know, but it is frustrating because I understand that the world is so fast and frantic. It's frantic. I think that's the best word. The world is frantic. That people don't have time, but I believe there is. I believe the time that we live in now, Ora, there is no excuse for not knowing what's going on.
JJ, you are so right on. There is no excuse for it. There really isn't. And I'm with you on it. I don't feel like I don't want to waste my time wasting my time by not talking
Yes.
about things that are real in real time. Talk about present moment.
Mm.
I want to talk about what's happening in real time. Okay.
Yes.
I really do.
And be unafraid and unapologetic in your beliefs. If they're rooted in data, facts, experience, life, don't get bullied into being quiet, because you're right. You said this multiple times today, and you're absolutely right. The stakes are too high now.
They are.
The time of fence straddling and trying to get along, I think those days are over. I don't mean that in you be mean and rude and cruel. I believe you be civil, but you be firm. This is what I believe. My experience is the border. I lived it. So I'm not going to make myself submissive to somebody in a conversation just because their feelings and this, I want to live in unicorn land. No, this is happening. You don't have to like me, but
Right.
you can't dispute. This is the statistics. This is happening. Can we get into reality, please?
Yeah, and yes, and yes to all of the above, because when I think that we, for the last 3 years, one of the, the main reasons why I did my first event for Bobby Kennedy when he was at the helm of Children's Health Defense was because he was censored. He was deplatformed, okay? And I knew as clear as day that tyranny had hit our shores. I was like, holy crap, what just happened? They're literally plucking people out of the game because they're saying something that they don't want you to say right now. So, for 3 years, we've lived with such craziness. I mean, complete craziness. And now, sadly enough, we're now dealing with a war in Israel. It's just being piled on and piled on and piled on. Do we have any time to waste? I mean,
I don't think we do.
We just came out of a 3 year.
We don't.
We don't.
Go ahead. And what I was going to say, Ora, on that is, and I always go back to, the solution. People are like, well, how do I fight something that's so big? Whether it's the global elites or, these axis of different countries that we see lining up. How do you fight that? And I always tell people the same way you're taught to fight in the military, or the same way small towns fight for each other. You fight for each other. You learn about your neighbors, and you listen, and you stay firm, as JJ said, and you establish a belief system in a small group, which I think is important, where you might not agree on everything. But for instance, this neighborhood here in Salem, I mean, there's my upstairs neighbors. This is a multifamily, this condo, and they've got the big LGBT whatever flag, hanging there. But I still, we're neighbors. We share a structure. And, we're going shopping at Home Depot to get the power washer. And I went out of my way to go to the art festival in Salem to go check out my neighbor's art stand. He's an amazing artist. And, our belief system has become like, hey, we look out for each other. It could be something as small as, hey, you took out the garbage, I'll bring it back in. Those little things. Can I get a ride here? Can I get a ride there? And that's as small as that sounds, I think that those are important things we've established that keep us from hating each other, keep us from letting the flag or my American flag make us hate each other. It's because we we only know each other as people because we don't know each other online, and all of our rules are established in the real world, and they're things we can all live with. Am I going to agree with their lifestyle? No, but we also have a rule that the common areas are common areas, and they're meant for laundry and storage and stuff like that, and we respect each other that way. So I think I don't even know I got on that topic, but
no, but that's civility. That's just being kind.
It's important, Brian, because I think you guys were talking about it before I got on, that be aware of your environment. Be aware. I live in a part of Los Angeles that's very nice. A new neighbor just moved on the block, and like what's happening all over, as you guys know, crime is increasing. There's no protection. We're on our own, people. We're on our own. Good luck. The whole defund the police, as you know, and all that. And so my neighbor, a new neighbor, and it's fantastic to watch him go, hey, he's connected with all of us neighbors, and we basically always live in our own little bubbles. It's far too easy to live in your own little bubble. And we're taking action as a community, as a neighborhood, so that we can, do something about crime increasing. And I think it's important because, again, the stakes are high. This is a game changer. Things are very different, and they're going to increase. Things are only going to increase, as we know. So we better know our neighbors, and we better try to work civilly with our neighbors. It's the macro micro. We've got to be able to, this problem solve within our own communities. If we can't get along within our own communities, how are we going to get along out there in the world? So I think it's very important to do what you're doing, what I'm doing, what JJ's doing. We have to, and hopefully there are more of us that are recognizing the importance of this, to work with each other.
Or
I think.
Go ahead, JJ. No.
I just think
I'm told I cut you off too much. So
I just think that we have more in common than we don't.
Yes.
And I go on podcasts for when I wrote my book. Obviously, you know how it goes. Or you go everywhere to talk to everybody, to promote your book and your beliefs. So I've been on podcasts with far left, and I'm good with talking to anybody as long as they give me time to speak. And what's interesting is the really minor stuff kind of gets washed away, and we all come at the end, we're agreeing that all we want is a safe community that has law and order, and it provides opportunities and freedoms for us as Americans. Yes. I believe the higher echelons of people, the elites, if you want to call it, corporate politicians, they're in a whole nother world where they make money and attain and retain power through division. The average American does not care about race, the color of skin, where you're voting. They're just like, hey, dude, your yard looks great. How do I get my grass to look that green? Like I tell my son, I said, Joseph, do you think that we care what our neighbors, their skin color is? I said, if we get a white neighbor and he doesn't take care of his yard and he's playing music, do you want to live next to that? Or do you just want to live next to a guy that's just kind and respectful? But we have more in common than the media and the elites portray us as. We're balkanized. We're not. I don't hate the rich. I don't hate people that have. I look and say, well, I'd like to aspire to obtain that. And I don't look at the poor and go, you're lazy, you're lazy. No, we're Americans. That's what has made America so special, is not diversity. It's the view of we're all in this together. When I would run special units and I was out in the middle of the night with 3 other guys, and we were in where you live. I know where you live.
Yeah, Ora, you've got to read that book. It's really good.
So I ran a 50-man unit, 60-man unit, and we combated the giant Mexican panga vessels that were loaded with narcotics. and they would land under all the very expensive, affluent neighborhoods of Southern California, because it's the beach, right? And we would go down and we would take down these narcotic loads, and we arrest 30 to 40 people. And we would do that about 2 or 3 in the morning and have the crime scene cleaned and moved out by 5 in the morning, while everyone starts to come out and jog on the beach, early morning. And they have no idea that I just took down 10,000 pounds of hard narco in your backyard.
Wow.
But my point is that in my job in the United States Border Patrol, being white is a minority. The majority is Hispanic. But when I look at my career in my unit, we used to joke that we were the United Nations. We had every nationality you can imagine. Nobody cares what color you are.
I know.
Nobody cares. My guys, when I'm down in the woods or I'm taking on the beach in Palos Verdes or Santa Barbara, am I looking at my buddy and going, wow, you're black? I don't even know what color he is. I'm just saying, that's my buddy. I got your back, man.
I know.
But that's how America looks.
I know.
Isn't that right?
It's learned behavior. Come on, you guys, it's learned behavior. It's programming. You guys know that all too well.
Absolutely.
It's all about programming. It's all about keeping us polarized, And by the way, that game is at its all-time high right now. That's why we got to bust that. We really do.
Well, we do. And Ora, I have to jump in and say it. You mentioned earlier we're heading towards World War III.
Well, I'm not declaring that. So let it
No, but I believe declare that
But I'm acknowledging that is when I'm hearing that said by the president of Turkey, and it's something that has been prophesized, predicted, and the way things are working on the planet, it may very well be, and we all better see it for what it is. So
I think we're there. Is what I was going to say. I think, if you know the generations of warfare, many people believe that, we're at that point of 5th generation warfare, which is, first generation is club spike, swords, everything evolves from there based on big paradigms and capabilities like air support and stuff like that. Well, now it's the war for the mind. And that's really what 5th generation warfare is. Right. And JJ, you were talking
psychological warfare, right?
At the highest levels. And JJ, you talked about how we're all we're separated and we're told we're different and everything, but that's by design, because it's literally
we know it, you guys. We know it.
This happened in the Cultural Revolution in China in the 60s and into the 70s, and it was by design. And what it does is there's an effort by our adversaries, with the help of useful idiots, as Lenin would call them, within our own country, who are greedy and can't see tomorrow and live in 4-year terms, not realizing that the Chinese Communist Party thinks in dynasties. And people forget, where are you hearing these drum beats? You're hearing it on MSNBC, Fox, and ABC, PBS. And, most of them get their news from Associated Press and Reuters. And what a lot of people don't know is that NBC, Reuters, and AP currently have active memorandums of cooperation with Xinhua Newsnet, which is, and it's not a secret, it's very overt, but Xinhua Newsnet, if you've seen Xinhua News on Twitter and stuff, that's actually the Chinese Ministry of Propaganda. And
hello, TikTok.
Oh, TikTok, it's the digital fentanyl, But what the goal is, it makes you reliant on the state for everything. So you have to break up the nuclear family first. You have to kill religion. You have to kill communities. And I gave this speech, or I think you went to it in San Jose. I said, if you want to take out this country, and the stated goal of the Chinese Communist Party is to be the global hegemon by 2049, and we are the biggest hurdle. So you have to take out America. Can't do that kinetically. So you take it out with unrestricted warfare, which is a myriad of different ways to attack your enemies, from the boardroom to the schoolroom. And part of that is turning people against each other, making sure people don't unify, making sure people don't have communities. Because do you know that one of the most downloaded movies in Hong Kong and Taiwan, which filter right back into mainland China, is the updated version of Red Dawn. And that movie must scare the hell out of anyone who's thinking about eventually trying to occupy this country, which is why they wouldn't want to attack it kinetically, because there's too many guns and there's too many communities and there's 50 little countries packed into this big landmass that all have a pretty fair degree of sovereignty. And so, the key thing that you're feeling, and I do think people are feeling it, I don't think it's organic. It's been around for a long time, because this really all started in the 60s and 70s. First with the Soviet Union. That was the first target of the Chinese Communist Party, was the Soviet Union. And the Soviets even tried to warn us in 1984, of all years, hey, don't arm these people, because they want your demise and they will do anything to get it. And I always recommend, the reason why I hit that drumbeat of China so much is because it takes a while. And my own wife, she's like, hey, honey, don't say that to the neighbors, because it sounds kind of crazy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've been telling her that since 2014 when I met her. And but then I just kept, leaving, filling up her inbox, leaving papers, on top of her ring light before a podcast. And she started reading them. And then her own research into the Pfizer documents took her in that direction. She's like, oh my God, he's right. He's right. And so I'm not saying that we don't have a role in our own demise for those that do. What I am saying is it's being forced. It's being forced. The whole rollout of all of a sudden everyone needs to have broadband. Why is that a basic human right all of a sudden to have broadband? Because it keeps you in front of the screen. And keeps you separated from your communities. And so I always tell people, learn as much as you can about yourselves, learn as much as you can about your communities, and certainly learn as much as you can about the largest, richest country in the world, which, by the way, is still a developing country, according to the World Economic Forum and the WTO, China. But learn about your enemy, because they are the enemy, and they've stated very clearly, and they say it. The Chinese don't hide anything. They said, yeah, no, you guys, you're the ones who got to get rid of you. And once the reason I say that is because once you really start looking, and I say start there because then you're not jumping all over the place looking at these different topics and trying to piece things together. Do the Occam's razor in your research. Apply Occam's razor to your research. The most likely suspect is the one I'm going to investigate. Because once you have transparency, no matter how bad that thing is, and I know this from being a private detective and finding a cheating spouse when I did that kind of work, or finding which company is trying to subvert the other company, for market share. As bad as the results are, the clients that I gave those results to were in a much better place psychologically, emotionally, and everything, because they had transparency. And there's just something about turning on the lights that really, really, it takes away the fear, which allows you to think and then better arm yourself figuratively and literally against the impending threat.
Absolutely, Brian. What a time we're in.
A time. Klaus Schwab says, eats the bugs. I don't know who Rev Man's solution is, but I want to copy a book of everything he puts out.
Couldn't they do better than that? I mean, is that the best they can come up with? It's like, eat the bugs. You'll own nothing, you'll be happy, and you'll
honestly,
come up with something better.
Do you think that's because they're just so arrogant that they just
I think it's really showing you right there, how low they can make you go.
Yes.
Watch show you how low we can make you go.
Yep.
I also think it's theater. I think it's a distractor.
It is theater. I mean, you could say very Shakespearean, life is a stage and we're all the actors, isn't that true? But I mean, it's like sometimes I listen to, especially Klaus Schwab. He's like something out of, Central Casting and
Yes.
Dr. Evil. It's like
Have you seen Ora? Have you seen Iron Man 3?
I have not. No.
Okay, everyone has to.
God.
And by the
No,
way,
we don't.
Iron
No,
Man,
we don't.
yes, Iron Man 3, by the way, is like about 25% of the units, and Ora, you were in the movie.
Wait a minute. You just asked Nora, very, very
Ora.
intelligent, Ora,
Okay.
that have you seen Iron Man 3?
Yes.
Are you kidding me, Brian?
No, not at all.
I could have.
Not at all.
You would never. I have to because I have a kid and I refuse. I just sit there and you want to talk about not being in the moment, Ora? When I have to watch those Marvel movies, I transpond myself out into some other universe for 3 hours.
You're like,
I love them. I love them.
Well,
but the reason I say watch that,
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Say so many of those films are metaphorically infused. They really are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've got they're loaded. As commercial as they may be, there's a lot in there,
It's also, it actually is Chinese propaganda. Like I think it was Tencent or something bought like 25% of the units, and those are like shares. When you're, so when you see all those producers on a movie, stop me if I'm wrong, Ora, because my claim to fame is being the assassin in one of the Mailer films, and with Dylan McDermott, my scene got cut, unfortunately, but I'm still listed as the assassin. A movie called Blind, which tanked, but the thing is, it's propaganda. But that aside, there is a character in the movie called the Mandarin, and the Mandarin is, I think it's Ben Kingsley, who I love, and he's this new force. He's like it's almost like Klaus Schwab and Osama bin Laden put together. And he's like, they're showing the grainy films of this destruction this new terrorist is causing around the world, and he's like, I am not a murderer. I am a teacher, and he's just like, all that dime store, philosophy that these guys use. And can I spoil it for you guys?
Oh, please.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. So if you're on the chat, close your ears if you haven't seen it. It's not a great movie, but for this part alone, well, Iron Man decides he's got to hunt this guy down, and he does. He finds him, and he bursts in, and there's 3 people in a bed, and it's the Mandarin and two hot girls, and so he's just like, Iron Man's ready to vaporize this guy, and the girls run out, and he gets up, and he's like, oh yeah, he's like this drunk Englishman. He's an actor who has been put up as the bad guy. None of the executions are real. It's all a set. And his whole thing is to be the distractor from the real boss. So every time I hear Klaus Schwab speaking with, like Rev Man said there, Klaus Schwab says, eat the bugs. When I first heard this guy, I'm like, this got to be a joke. Like, come on.
Yeah. No,
like,
what was that outfit he had on?
Yes.
He looked like something out of the, what was that?
Austin Powers movies.
Oh, total Austin Powers, complete Mike Myers as Dr. Evil for sure. But he was wearing that black, like, what was it? It was like some weird.
Yeah, he had like, it was like, they had like
it reminds me of that dude from Flash Gordon. Remember the bad guy with the big Fu Manchu?
If this really is, if we're really, in the Matrix here, which, I guess we kind of are some kind of Matrix here, but you sit there and you go, can we not dispel that? I mean, I'm amazed at who is in that audience listening to Klaus Schwab. I mean, there's and I know we've been on for a while. We could go down so many, like these aren't even rabbit holes. These are like above ground. We're like, ground at this point. These are not going down rabbit holes. This is the real deal. Okay. This is right. As you said, theater right in front of us. But how can you listen to Klaus Schwab? And I mean, you may be sitting next to some Saudi Arabian prince, but you want to go, did you hear what he just said? Did he just say eat the bugs? Like what?
You'll have nothing and be happy.
I do wonder if one of those Saudi princes is whispering to the guy from Turkey, and he's like, old Klaus was never the same since he got out of the Navy, is he?
Oh.
Did you see that thing where they just it was like someone said to me today, was that real with Alex Jones, where he's like yelling at Klaus Schwab? That wasn't. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
Well,
he does a lot of yelling.
They created some they spliced together an actual World Economic Forum moment, and Alex Jones is screaming at Klaus. I think he's screaming at George Soros. And
I'd love to see that.
It's very funny.
It's
very funny. It makes me like, did this really happen? But you know what? It should happen. I mean,
he's intense. He's intense, and I got to say, I've really grown to love Alex Jones, because I got to say, the guy's self-taught, and he's kind of put together a lot of the puzzle. And what I really respected about him, seriously, is that he was down on the border from the get-go, and that yelling that he does, he had his crew surrounding cars saying, "That's not your kid. What are you doing with that?" I was like, all right, everyone should be doing that, like Ora was saying.
But aren't we just waiting for that moment, you guys, where like somebody's going to stand up? It's like some young guy who just stood up and really held Hillary Clinton. Really.
Yeah, I saw that.
About that.
Yeah. And you could see she was, she kind of threw her off, and she tried all these ways to shut him up, and he wasn't having it. So.
Right.
It makes you wonder, like, you're listening to Klaus Schwab, you're listening to Yuval Harari, and they're saying such crazy stuff. Do you not think somebody in that audience one day, hopefully sooner than later, is going to stand up or go crazy?
Ora, I've got to say,
please make that happen.
I want to believe that, some of it I think is an act, but I mean, look, I don't know if you ever hung out in the Manhattan elite circles, the kind of like Tom Wolfe crowd, where you have one of each, this is the so-and-so, he's a poet, he has AIDS, and this is so-and-so, like that's how, but I've been there. I was in George Soros's daughter's house the night the whole Trump, female genitalia grabbing thing was exposed. I was in George Soros' daughter's house with friends of ours who are in the finance industry. And to hear them talk, it was amazing. I'm like, have you ever met a real human being? And by that, I mean, not so much on the Trump thing, but, and I got to admit, this is like bad manners, and I shouldn't say this because no one will ever invite me to their house again. But once I heard it was George Soros' house, I was like, camera, I'm going to just walk up the stairs here. I just had to capture the moment, but not of the people talking, but, just the opulence. And, but no, one guy who I swear to God is totally on the spectrum. He's actually featured in Naomi's book, The Bodies of Others. And she talks about these parties too in the book. And so he's sitting there. Now, this guy, trust me, he couldn't make friends with my puppy who's friends with everyone. He's just so far removed from human beings. And it's not like he's a evil guy. Like, he's not like evil, like he wants to do people harm. It's almost like owning a pet lizard. There's no warmth. You never really connect with a pet lizard. And he's sitting there and he's looking down at people walking down the street. He goes, I think I should run for president. I actually know what these people need better than they even do. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, are you serious? And for me, it was fun because I was the outside guy. I could do anything I wanted. It was expected. I was like Simon Phoenix in the future that was portrayed in Demolition Man. Like, I'm that dude. But oh my God. One girl wrote a book about dreams. She had no psychology degree or training or anything. She just liked dreams. And it was a New York Times bestseller because you can buy your way onto that. And I was asking her about dreams, and she's like, dreams are the essence of us. I'm like, okay. But what does that mean? She's like, that's up to you to decide. I'm like, oh, sorry, God. All right.
Okay.
Have you seen this world, Ora?
Yeah, no, it's pretty wild. We're on a wild ride right now. This is
And,
about as wild as you can get.
and JJ, if there's ever a chance, I will definitely. It looks like we're getting invited, weirdly getting invited back to some of these things.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
which I can't believe they invite Naomi because she's a freaking wrecking ball sometimes, and I love it. That's why I liked her right away. I'm like,
Yeah,
for
that we need that. We need to shake it up. We need to rattle the cage. We really do. And do it
she,
civilly or
mm,
diplomatically or humorously, but do it. Do something. Where you can try. I mean, I even with my book Time to Awaken, I say, I think I have 10 questions, and so if someone says, "Well, I followed the science," I'm like, "Well, can you explain what the science is?" And they're like,
Nobody could.
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, we followed the science. I'm like, okay, if we followed the science or it's the vaccine. Well, what's in the vaccine? What did you just put inside your body? And it just short circuits people. If you just if you just turn the mirror on them, and they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they don't know what to say. They just
but
they're on
they
automatic.
sure they sure will run from dairy though and gluten and check every label.
Exactly,
Oh God.
exactly. I don't.
There's still people running to get booster shots
I
after
know.
they've already had 4 booster shots, had COVID 3 times, and they're gonna go get it. And I'm like, oh my God.
That is, I don't even know how you're wired up at that point. I'd like to understand. Is it a wiring issue? Is it a chromosome thing? Is it I mean,
I don't,
we can call it mass formation psychoses, cognitive dissonance. I mean, we've got,
Yeah.
right.
but I'd like to know what the wiring looks like because it defies logic. I mean, you've gotten the fifth shot after your cousin just died 3 days later from the last booster. I
Has
don't.
anyone has anyone ever stopped
Yeah.
to question? Have we ever had this many recommended shots of any vaccine? And I would even say they're closing in on the flu vaccine in terms
Right.
of
Have we ever had a vaccine that's been recommended to still get after you've had the virus? I
Yeah.
mean, logic
right.
logic
Oh.
prevails. It's like after they've come out, the health organizations have come out and said the masks don't work. They don't stop transmission and stop you from not, getting COVID. They've told you everything you need to hear, and they still. I mean, I think they could come out and say the shots could kill you, and people will still get them.
Ignorance may be
Yes.
sin o cino period saying ignorance may be I don't know sin o. I think we've gone beyond ignorance by the fifth shot. I mean, good point, but yeah, I mean
Go,
seriously, like
go
if
figure.
basically some guy put on Twitter a long time ago said, if you took your dog to the vet 5 times and he got
Yeah.
worse every time, would you keep taking him?
Do you know? By the way, speaking of vets, and I know I can tell you, and the three of us can talk till forever. But
Oh
I have a.
yeah.
She shall remain nameless. This is a whole opening up a can of worms, and she came to the point where I say we're going to be able to look into each other's eyes and go, "Oh, okay, we're in the same sane reality." And she told me that she's not in favor of vaccines even for animals, and she has seen cancer on animals that have repeatedly gotten vaccines in that area of their body
Oh
because
my god.
that's big pharma. As you don't think it passes over into the animal world. It's like,
Well, the CEO of Pfizer is a veterinarian.
yeah, there was that shot that came up. Do you know they tried to slip a shot in for the dogs at one point? They didn't call it the COVID shot, but it was like the upper respiratory mysterious thing that appeared, and it left as soon as it came. And all these people, my girlfriend gave her dog the shot, the dog died on the table.
Oh.
Well, we'll have to talk about that another time, but you are getting into something called One Health that I've been covering. And I'm not kidding you. One Health is the ideology underneath the pandemic treaty,
Yeah.
which, if anyone who hasn't, they keep changing the name, but basically that's giving the WHO power over all the member nations. to declare a pandemic, implement mask mandates, vaccine, forced inoculation. And if you just go to the WHO, I'd recommend, I'll put up some links, but, this is a thing like that, health, public health should have equitable results for man, beast, and the earth. And if you look at, it's weird, but it's funny as it is. It is something to really keep an eye on, because if you look at how many One Health offices have been established in our government at every level, it'll scare the hell out of you. And one of the main architects behind One Health, the recent version of it, I mean, it goes back 100 years. It used to be called One Medicine, but one of the last two authors of the One Health architecture that is sitting on the World Bank's website is the World Bank and Eco Health Alliance. Eco Health Alliance, owned by Peter Daszak. Peter Daszak, the guy who was Anthony Fauci's bag man and probably helped start this whole thing. Right. But I was going to say, like, Borla, he's a veterinarian, and if you look at the which was funny, because when they were making fun of Joe Rogan for taking horse paste, I had to say it, and I said it on Twitter, which always sounds kind of wimpy when I say it that way, but like I say, you guys are all making fun of Joe Rogan, for taking horse paste, which he didn't take horse paste. He took the, human version of that medicine.
Ivermectin, which has been around forever.
Yeah, and actually didn't the guy win like some major prize for inventing it? And it's like
a direct threat to Merck. It's like, anyway.
Yeah. I said, you guys are, you guys are saying, you're making fun of Joe Rogan saying took horse paste while you're running to get a vaccine that's being pushed by a veterinarian.
Yeah, and Joe Rogan, was over COVID in 3 days or something. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. He had the monoclonal antibodies that they wouldn't give anybody, which is already crimes against humanity. And doing away with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Anyway, we're going in a whole.
So, Ora, and I was gonna say, I'll have to sing in my tweet about how I compared. I have a really radical belief about COVID that it's actually just mass hangovers, and because that was the reason why they never closed liquor stores. And then when I actually did a side-by-side comparison of the list of symptoms for COVID, and they're the exact same symptoms as a hangover, and they are, and so especially long COVID, which I always like to say, the line from Wayne's World. One time I thought I had long COVID for a year, but it just turned out I was really, really bored. But before we leave, because we do have to get going, I just have to play one clip, Ora, and then I'm going to give you final thoughts. I'd like you to, and we'll get your information up about your book, which you didn't get to talk about, but I think we did talk about it in our conversation.
We did.
But I think mindfulness, I also think having boundaries and being conservative. And by being conservative, I don't mean like that's a political view. I think it's how you live your life, where like you have a set of rules. You change them as you need to, but having a defined set of boundaries helps you find and maintain definition. A brilliant guy on some space the other night was saying, the further left he sees people, the less boundaries and definition they have. And they can be so manipulated because they don't have a set of values and rules that they follow because they're ever changing. And this clip I'm playing is, he's a comedian. But I think it really is anyone who is, this is the guy, the guy this guy's portraying. This is the result of someone who's never in the moment, is never making themselves better or working on themselves. And this should be a warning to everyone. Don't be this guy. So it's like 2 minutes, but I like to end on a good laughy note here. And this one is pretty darn funny. So let me just call that up really quickly. But I thought about this guy when I contacted you and said, yeah, please come on. But this is, I think this is what people are actually going through, especially if you know any actors or people in the entertainment industry. I think you'll really appreciate this, but you don't need to. This, I think, is so many people that are so lost in the politics of all this and everything. And So let me just play this really quickly. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Haven't weighed in on Israel-Palestine. I honestly don't know who to post. Usually it's easy. BLM, bang. Ukraine, bang. COVID, bang. Hey, did you do your Israel-Palestine post yet? I've never missed a stand. Who'd you go with? I look at my phone, I see a lot of Republicans supporting Israel. So I go, maybe stay away from that. Then I see a lot of the people we were calling them. And get this, the people that we've been calling them Nazis with are happy Israel's getting attacked. Riddle me that. But there really is no easy answer here. Did you do your Israel-Palestine post yet?
No.
What does your manager think of that?
I'm retired.
Oh, you don't have representation. Obviously, I was at the front lines of getting mad at Kanye West when he was doing the anti-Semitism stuff. Everyone was thanking me for standing up for the Jewish community. So naturally, I'm seeing this happen. I go, okay, we're back with the Jews again. I see Kylie Jenner post for Israel. I think, okay, the word's in. Then boom, she's getting killed on every angle. So it's not Israel. So I started doing a bit more research. I'm seeing queers for Palestine. And generally, you want to be on the side of the queers. If you look at the things, you're not going to get in trouble if you go with what the queers are saying. Then Mia Khalifa, who we obviously support, is posting with the queers. And she's getting fired from her job. The whole reason I'm posting this is to get in better standing with my job. And by the way, I started to see that your silence is noted post popping up. So we're running out of fucking time. If you had to pick, who would you say?
I would stay out of it, like I told you.
But if you kind of have to choose, which is sort of what a situation I feel like I find myself in. But you don't understand. I got to post to support one of them. I know to you, it might be like, oh, who cares what he thinks? A buddy of mine booked a Geico commercial from his Ukraine TikTok. So it happens. Feels like we like decolonizing. What is decolonizing? Is that just like killing the people?
It's a difficult situation.
That's literally what I was saying, man. Because normally it's pretty easy.
I don't know what the answer is.
This one's, I just want to post one of the flags and sort of be done with it. It's tougher than you think. I'm getting yelled at if I post Palestine. I'm getting yelled at if I post Israel. It's starting to feel like, if anything, I'm the victim here. I'm looking on the internet. I see Jews for Palestine. I kid you not. Also, I'm watching the parade. We're talking Times Square. Between me and you, when I see a bunch of brown people having a parade, I think it's a pretty safe bet to be on their side. Never failed me before. I mean, people are probably texting each other right now, wondering where my statement is. Israel, though, probably, right? Yeah. For me, it's a little more complicated as a Gentile, you know what I'm saying? Maybe if I look at who's getting censored, that's a good place to look. Like, follow the YouTube warnings. And then I'm looking at UN women, I'm thinking, you know, follow the SNIS, whatever the women say is usually pretty good. They're just posting random shit that has nothing to do with it. Trans lesbians or lesbians. Can I just go with that? Just like a random blanket post. Be like, hey, lesbos, just so you know, lesbos with dongs are still lesbos. Stop avoiding the dong lesbos. I can't, I feel like it's the wrong move. But you got Israel and Palestine, you're thinking.
No English.
Oldest trick in the book, my friend. I wish I could do the same. Okay, so like if Native people in America took down some girls at Coachella, I'd probably be like with the natives against me, right? Like that seems right. I can talk to my representation for you if you're. Palestine's got to have Jewish people there, right? Like Palestine, isn't that? Am I being messed with here?
Palestine.
That sure sums up the craziness of it all, doesn't it? That's
Yes,
that's why. And that's why.
after.
Well, or I'm going to give you the final thoughts, and then everyone else will get this up tomorrow, and we'll go ahead and post all the links and everything like that. But Ora, why don't you close us out?
You know, the word final thoughts.
Sorry.
I don't have any final thoughts right now because this is such a in process situation that we're in. You know, we could wake up tomorrow and who knows what is going to happen. Do you know? So I just say, stay present, stay awake, stay aware, be informed. You know, that's really what I can say is, you know, be awake, be aware, know what's going on, you know, take that responsibility. That's the most I could really offer up at the end of this conversation to people is to, you know, do not be asleep at the wheel. This is not the time to be asleep at the wheel.
That's perfect.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with you, and thank you for coming on our podcast.
You too.
It was great.
Yeah, or it's always a pleasure, and time always flies.
I know. Really enjoyed it. We covered a lot of territory, and you know, there's a lot more to cover.
There is an Ori, and I'd love to be back on any time.
Thank you. As I like to say, to be continued. So no final thoughts. To be continued.
All right. Well, on that note, everyone,
you.
have a good night. And Ora, thank you so much. And we will talk to everyone soon. Thanks, everyone, for coming back. And if you have any questions again, you can write those to Brian at Daily Clout or info at Daily Clout and just say subject line, mostly peaceful, unrestricted. And don't forget to go to dailyclout.io, where Ora also has a column. And it is called the Ora, help me out here.
Mindful Activist.
That's what I thought. Okay, so the Mindful Activist, and she writes a column on that. And do you have anything coming out soon, Ora, on Daily Clout?
I'm interviewing the director and producer of Common Ground, which is a wonderful documentary that's out right now on regenerative farming and also the glyphosate situation with farmers. It's a great documentary. So I'm going to be interviewing them.
That's
soon to be up on DC.
DC, that's our Daily Clout. And as you can see, please visit Ora's website. It is scrolling along the bottom there. It is Ora Nadrich .com. And buy her book. Like I said, I was fortunate enough where it was gifted to me. But I've read this twice now. It's wonderful. JJ, I'll make sure you get a copy.
Please.
And check it.
Mm-hmm. Brian and JJ really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it too.
Much.
And say hi to the mister.
I most certainly will. Yeah.
All right.
Enjoy that Southern California weather. I miss it.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you.
All right. Take care.
Talk to everyone later.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.